Hey there, this is Andrew, and we're going to talk about the Alliance Restricted List. There are some other updates in this document that came out today, the Keyforge Tournament Rules and Guidelines. However, in this video, I'm just going to talk about the Alliance Restricted List. And one just notable thing that's not here is there was some discussion in the community of the possibility of just banning Legacy and Maverick from Alliance decks. I can totally see the wisdom in that. I also can see a little bit of taking away fun there. Anyway, they didn't do that. So Legacy and Maverick are allowed, which I think increases the breadth of things that could be done. But we do have this restricted list. So what does the restricted list mean? And let's take a step back and just, if you don't know, let me explain to you what Alliance is. In the Alliance format, each player brings an Alliance deck. That Alliance deck is composed of 3 individual house pods. Each house pod is a full set of 12 cards in a single house from a single deck. So you're limited in what house pods you could use by what you have available. You can't just build, individual cards. You're taking a house pod of 12 cards from a house from a deck, and you get 3 of those. They have to be within the same set, so you cannot take a Coda house pod and a Mass Mutation house pod. You can't put discs with Unfathomable, no matter what you do. But you take those 3 house pods from the same set. They have to be 3 separate houses, and you combine them together. And now you have 3 houses, 12 cards each, in a set. You have an Alliance deck, and you can play that in an Alliance format. You can't just take it to any event. It has to be an Alliance event. Okay, so it's restricted to in-set. Legacy and Maverick are fine. However, immediately people were thinking, how can we break this? What terrible things can we do? And so we'll talk about some of those and what the list is specifically trying to turn off. But the way the restricted list works is that each Alliance deck cannot include more than 1 card by name from the list. So, for example, Science Officer Morpheus is on the list. You can have any number of Science Officer Morpheus, but Restringuntus is also on the list. You cannot have a Restringuntus and Science Officer Morpheus. That was one of the combos that people were concerned would be pretty broken, because if you could exhume a couple of Morpheuses and then play Restringuntus, you just immediately lock your opponent out of all 3 houses. They can't play. For example, that's on the list. Now, some cards, 3 cards specifically, specify a limit 1 per deck. So most of the cards on here, you can have any number of that card. If you have that card, you can't have any other card from the list. But 3 out of the cards on here have limit 1 per deck, so you cannot even have multiples of that. Okay, so now the really interesting part is that if you bring an unmodified Archon deck, so it's all 3 houses are the same or from the same deck, it's just a Keyforge deck, the restricted list does not apply. So if you opened a Legacy Restringuntus with 2 Exhumes and 2 Morpheuses in Worlds Collide, and that's just a deck, you can bring that. That's okay. You just can't build it in Alliance. So, and I love that. I think that really upholds the spirit of Keyforge. So, what is on the list? First one, Dark Amber Vault, limit 1 per deck. So, I don't think this really interacts with anything else here very much, except like if you got Legacies or United Action, or I guess you can't have a Dav and a library card, which isn't really that's not really a thing that people would go for, but they just both happen to be on here, so that's fine. But you cannot have multiple Dark Amber Vaults. So one deck that I played around with for Alliance, because I was hoping Dav wouldn't get added to the restricted list in this way, is a deck that has 2 or 3 Dark Amber Vaults and a ton of mutants, and therefore you just end up drawing a ton of cards. It's interesting to me because a deck like that is vulnerable to countering with Quixelstone. Of course, you can make sure you have stuff that has artifact control, but your opponent will probably be bringing stuff with artifact control too. So are your dabs really going to work out? It's a big question. Anyway, can't do it. Limit one, or can't have multiples. It's limit one per deck. Now you could still bring a great single dab deck. Nothing's stopping you from that. And I mean, I have some just naturally great single dab decks. Imagine what you could do with, filling out those other two houses really, really nicely with good mutants. The other thing that is worth saying here is there are natural 2-dav decks, right? There are decks that have dav in two different houses, and there are decks that have 2 davs in the same house. I don't think I've seen 3 because it's sufficiently rare that I don't think I've seen a deck with 3, but there might be one out there. Anyway, okay, so, but again, you could bring a 2 or 3 dav deck if that's actually the deck that the Keyforge algorithm gave you. Okay, this next one is really confusing. Ghost form. Okay, I can speculate about what they're trying to stop here, but it seems a little silly to me, to be honest. Ghost form makes a creature really hard to kill. You can't damage it and you can't destroy it. But that doesn't mean you can't remove it at all. There are still other ways to do that. You can return it to hand. You can purge it. You can shuffle it back into the deck. So I kind of feel like Ghost form it's great, but it's not, it doesn't totally shut a game down. Of course, some of those other options might be a little more rare to get. So what are they trying to protect here? There's only three creatures on this list. So, and I do not think that Ghost form is meant to, that they're worried about people doing Ghost form Time Traveler. Not only is that a legacy with an anomaly, but it just wouldn't be that good. Time Traveler you want to play, and then you want to shuffle it back in your deck. On the other hand, with Restringentus, okay, that could be pretty strong, right? You're locked out of that house. But if you're limited to one Restringentus, that's, again, are they really going to bank their whole strategy on, hey, we're going to keep Restringentus out, it's really going to stay out, and that's going to end the game? That seems a little far-fetched to me. And with Morpheus, it's good. It's really good because Morpheus is a great card if you have lots of play effects, which I'm sure somebody building an alliance deck built around Morpheus would have a lot of play effects. But is it that good? Yeah, that's a real question in my mind. So I think Ghost form probably doesn't deserve to be on here, but that's okay. That's, they get to make the list. What else do we have here? Lateral shift. It's interesting that it's in any number, and I guess what could happen is if you think your opponent's going to bring an alliance deck built around one of these cards, and you bring something that isn't supposed to be allowed with it, and you also bring lateral shift, that's real good. That's real good. But I don't know. I actually don't think it's that good. Okay. Next is library access, and library access is limited to 1 per deck. That makes sense because it's limited to 1 per deck in real decks. So this prevents somebody from having Mavericks in 2 other houses and having 3 library accesses to play. Theoretically, you could go real crazy there because you could, in Logos, library access, phase shift, play another library access, phase shift, play another library access, and now you have 3 going, that would be pretty broken. So that just really makes sense. And additionally, I think that library card must be on here because I guess you could get like a legacy library access with a library card theoretically, and that would be pretty bonkers. So, because you could get them both to fire. So this prevents that. That's the only interaction that makes sense with the library card, because library card doesn't really interact with United Action. But library access does. So library access is really a broken card here, and I think they're trying to limit it against a lot of these. Library access plus Martian generosity would be probably too good. Library access plus time traveler. I don't think that's too good, but I can see. I guess the problem is you have to actually open a deck that has the library access and the time traveler, and so um, I don't. I think it's fine. But anyway, it is good, and you can't do that. And you also can't do library access united action, which you have to have a legacy to do that. But I have it. And in that case, if you have library access played and you get you do united action, you do the library access, and you have a card from Logos in your other house, then you can just keep playing until you rule of 6 to everything, because every time you play a card, you draw a card ad infinitum until you run out of cards. And if you have a key cheat in there, you've won for sure. So so that makes sense. Now the interesting thing to me, you can still do some interesting stuff with the library access. So it's not like that's a dead card. It's still very interesting, and there's things you can do with it. But you cannot do the library access united action play everything. Okay, so yeah, library card again. I don't think it interacts with anything except for like a legacy library access. Martian Gen. The only thing in here that it really interacts with would be like the have it like library access. You can't really get it. It's so rare because it's rare, and then with all these cards that are since AOA, you kind of you don't have to worry about it so much because Martian Gen is so rare to be a legacy Maverick rare card. It's just not coming up. Restringentus Morpheus, they're trying to prevent that, I'm sure. I think the Time Traveler is just there because of the library access, which I think that's I guess, and United Action I think is just there for library access. So now there's things that there are strong cards that they did not ban here, like you can still have a lot of house cheating cards, which are good with the library access. You just can't have the Eternal House cheating card. There are things like you could still have a 6 gigantic deck. If you want to build that. There are things like, Control the Weak. That's just a really good card, not affected in any way here. So I think they got a couple things I probably wouldn't have put on here, but I don't think it's bad, and I think they left a lot of good options open. So I'm excited and plan to try this out. So maybe I'll get to sit across the table from you sometime and play it. That'd be fun. In the meantime, get out there and forge some keys.